Okay, so today we're going to talk through plateaus. So if you're ever worried that you're not seeing the weights like increase on certain exercises or on every exercise, I'm going to tell you how we can actually break through that. Okay, but while I do that today, I'm going to be just doing some like light weights for my upper body just to prepare myself for tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm going into a new program. So I just want to do a few warm-up sets for that. And then in between, we'll talk about plateaus. So I'm going to start with just some incline bench. So firstly, you kind of need to figure out whether or not you actually are in a plateau. So what a plateau basically is just when the weights that you're trying to lift are not increasing over a significant period of time. If you're not seeing an increase for over like 1 week, not a big deal. You need it to see that over a long period of time. And then you can kind of realize, all right, I'm in a plateau. Now I need to try and figure out how to break through it. Okay, so question is, why do we plateau? So for most people, when we're training, we maybe have some like arbitrary goals that we want to try and achieve. We know roughly what we're doing in terms of training. We know the exercises. We kind of know the sets and reps. But maybe there isn't enough structure. So I think for a lot of new people, they can get away with just doing whatever because, you know, they get the newbie gains. But after a while, that will only get you so far. So we need to figure out how we can change what we're doing based on whether or not we are now in like the new stage of training or whether or not we're a little bit more advanced now. So you're more likely to hit a plateau if you're just doing the exact same thing that you were doing way back, you know, when you first started training, and you're maybe like a year or so into training, maybe a little bit more, where you're not getting those newbie gains and you're wondering why doing what you were doing before isn't getting you to where you want to get to. So what you need is a bit more structure and a bit more knowledge on like how to train to make sure that you don't hit those plateaus and you push through it, okay? Now, there are a few reasons why we can hit plateaus that don't even relate to like structure and to like the actual training aspect. For example, if you're starting to have like a stressful period in your life, like at work or maybe in your personal life, that could make you hit a plateau because you don't have the energy and the concentration to push hard in those sessions and to break through whatever weight it is that you're trying to break through. So that's one thing, is like how stress can contribute to it. The other thing could be maybe you're not sleeping as much. So I know that I've worked with clients that have to do day and night shifts, right? They're doctors or they're nurses. They have to do day and night shifts. And that is going to play an effect on how well you can train. You know, when you're doing your day shifts, maybe you can actually train pretty hard. But then when you suddenly switch over to night shifts and you're trying to get in a workout, it's going to be a lot more difficult because your sleep's not going to be as good. You're not going to feel as well rested. You're not going to have the energy. And you might not even want to train because, I mean, I know when I used to do night shifts, that the last thing on my mind was, you know, training and whatever it was that, you know, I was trying to do outside of work. It was more just do the work, do the night shift, go do my day shift, go to bed, night shift, day shift. And yeah, nothing else really mattered. So that's another reason why you can like hit a plateau, is like sleep, stress. But those are the main things like outside of like training that can like kind of impact it. And obviously like illness, if you get ill or maybe you get an injury, like that's another reason why you can hit a plateau. But that's less relevant because we all know that if we're ill, we're not going to be able to perform as well. And we also know that if we're injured, we're probably going to have to regress before we slowly progress. Okay. Now let's figure out how we can break through our plateaus, right? That's why you're here. You want to know how you can break through those plateaus. So first things you need to consider when it comes to like the actual training is what can we adjust? So there's volume, which is like the amount of sets and reps that you're doing within a week. That's the volume. The intensity, so that's like how heavy you're going, how close to failure you're going. And what's the last one? There's the exercises that you do. So you can implement different exercises. You can change it up to give your body like a new stimulus. And they're like the main things when it comes down to like training. And then also like nutrition side of things. Let's say you're someone who's trying to like lean down. you're going to find it a lot harder to gain in strength whilst you're getting lean. Now, if you're like much like higher body fat percentage, let's say you're 30%, you can probably still get strong whilst leaning down. However, when you get a bit lower, let's say down towards like 16% body fat for men, maybe more towards like 18% for women, it's going to be harder to gain strength whilst staying that lean. It's not impossible. It's definitely doable, but it's very hard for people, especially those of you that it isn't like your livelihood. Like if you're a bodybuilder, it's a little bit easier. If you're someone like me who works in the gym, it's a little bit easier. It's still difficult, but it's definitely easier. But you're just not going to have the energy because you don't have like the calories that you can consume to like burn in a session to make sure that you're pushing hard. Plus, you know, you have to go to work and stuff. And so that has a bigger impact. Whereas when I first leaned down, actually, I think I was out of work, or maybe it was like the holidays or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I didn't have to like worry about going to work. It was wake up, eat, train, do whatever I wanted for the rest of the day, which made stuff easy because I didn't have to worry about like excess energy that I was burning through like work or through like whatever else. It might have been during COVID, so like even like socialization, but I didn't have to worry about all those other things impacting whether or not I could train hard. I could still go to the gym and train pretty hard. But even then, I still didn't actually gain that much strength. Definitely not as much as I would have gained if maybe I was in a bulk, for example. So when we're looking to break through that plateau, then let's go through the nutrition and the program side of things. Let's start with the nutrition. If I want to try and break through a plateau, maybe what I have to consider is eating more calories, okay? Now, for a lot of people, this can be a little bit uncomfortable because, you know, you don't want to gain too much weight, and you can definitely like gain like not significant amounts of fat, but also gain a lot of muscle. But when I bulk, I personally just don't like to think about nutrition. I like to just like eat whatever, knowing that like I have enough fuel. So I always make sure that I'm eating enough, and then anything excess that I'm eating, I don't really worry about because I know that I can get it off. But if you suddenly start consuming more food, you're going to have more energy to push at the gym. You're going to be able to satiate those muscles a lot more and recover, especially as long as you're having, obviously, as well, a lot of protein for the protein synthesis. So when we can start consuming more, that's one way that we can help break through a plateau. Okay, so if you find that you're in a plateau, but you're also really concerned about your nutrition, that could be one way to go about it, is just eating more to break through that plateau, get to the strength that you want, and then maybe trim back down if that is what your goal is. Okay, you just have to decide what's more important, breaking through that plateau or staying lean. And that's up to you. Now, in terms of volume, now I want to quickly touch on like deloads. I spoke about this before. It's sometimes we hit a plateau because we're not actually letting our body like rest enough. This is rare. I truthfully think, especially if you're new to training, you don't really need to deload. This probably shouldn't impact you, especially if we're kind of just doing hypertrophy training. But there is a chance that, especially with like work and stuff alongside it, personal things, that you might find, lost my train of thought. You might find that you need to deload. So you take a week off, and then weirdly, you actually come back a little bit stronger. And that's just because your body's well rested. You haven't lost any muscle, because you could take an entire week off training, not even touch any weights. You're not going to lose any muscle. It takes quite a long time to start losing muscle, and you really have to do like nothing. Once your body has muscle, kind of wants to keep it. But yeah, you could consider doing a deload, okay? You could try a deload 1 week where you're not really training, or you just lower the volume and stuff, and then see if that makes you come back a little bit stronger. If it doesn't, then it's probably a sign that you didn't actually need a deload, in truth. And yeah, I do think it's quite rare that people do need to deload. But then in terms of the volume, so what we can do is, if our focus is on strength and the weight's going up, we can actually cut down some volume and make the sets more meaningful by adding more rest in between our sets and making the intensity a little bit higher. So we're going to talk about volume and intensity now. So as volume goes up, maybe we want our intensity to go down. But the reverse is true, is as our volume goes down, we want the intensity to go up. So you can play around with this a little bit, but if you're really worried about like the weight on the bar going up, I would say you want the intensity to be high and the volume to be a little bit lower, okay? Because you've probably been in a hypertrophy phase where the volume's high for, I don't know, maybe you've been doing it for, you're brand new to the gym, you've been doing it for 12 months, you've been seeing progress, great. Now you've hit that plateau after 12 months. So maybe what we need to try and do is, now that we have that muscle size, is we now need to try and get the weights on the bar higher and to work on other things other than like our muscle size, like our neural adaptations to like the heavy load, and like basically how efficiently we can use that muscle size to push that weight. So that being said, if I've done the hypertrophy for a while, I would then go into like heavy sets, whatever lifts I find more important, make sure that I do those at the start of the session and I have them in my program. But I'll do my, let's say bench press. I'm going to do my really heavy bench press at the start of the session. I'm going to be aiming for like 5 reps or less. And in those, after those sets, I'm going to make sure that I'm resting for almost as long as I can allow. Let's say 5 to 8 minutes, I would say. Now you can leave a little bit longer in between. But again, it depends on your time. And that way, hopefully, you'll be able to see the weights going up because you're now getting a new stimulus and new adaptations compared to when you were just doing hypertrophy, because your body's having to manage the heavier load, even though it's less reps and you think, oh, am I actually doing more? It's just a new stimulus. So you're gonna teach your body how to adapt to that new stimulus over time, all right? So that's a way that you can play around with volume and intensity. But the reverse can be true as well. So if I've been doing a lot of strength training and I can't seem to break through the plateau, I just can't seem to get the weights to go up anymore, then what we can consider is that maybe what we need to do is grow more muscle. So we do the reverse. We start adding a lot more volume and making sure that we're pushing close to failure, not leaving any reps in reserve, and trying to grow the muscle over a period of, I don't know, maybe 12 weeks, let's say. I like 12 weeks. 12 weeks tends to be a good time to actually see progress. So 12 weeks, and then we can go back into the strength to try and now use that muscle that we just gained to go onto those, go into the strength and try and increase the weight on those bars. Okay, so that is how you can play around with volume and intensity. Then, the other thing you could think about now is exercise selection. So if I'm doing the same exercises non-stop for an entire year, that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I would probably say that's quite a good thing. Doing the same exercises can help you master those exercises and teach you how to use the muscles effectively doing that exercise. So if you are doing lateral raises, the first time you do lateral raises, you might not actually feel it in your side delt. You might feel it, I don't know, in your traps. And over time, you learn to feel it in your side delts, and so that your side delts actually get the effect of the exercise and can grow. So there is value in doing the same thing over and over. And in fact, I very often would say, at least for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, to try and make sure that the bulk of the exercises are just the same. But the reverse can be true. If we're doing the same exercises over and over, it can get a bit boring for some people. So having exercise variety can be good because it gets you maybe a little bit more excited. So when you go into a set, it's not just feeling like the same, process that you're going through. Sometimes changing an exercise, not because it's better than the exercise you're doing. So let's say incline bench. All right, that's one of the best dumbbell incline bench, one of the best exercises for growing your chest. Okay. But if you've been doing this for 12 weeks and then and you're not really seeing any progress with it, maybe what I'd do is I'd switch it up, and maybe we would go to something like we could go to some chest flies. Okay, we could go to chest flies, and maybe you start enjoying that exercise. And so you feel more motivated when you go to the gym, because it's not like, the same relentless monotony of just doing the same thing over and over and over. And actually, now I'm a little bit more excited because, brand new exercise. I can like test out the weight, see the progress, and try and learn something new. So you get a little bit more excited because in truth, motivation is a very key aspect in training. And this is especially true with athletes. When I used to do my studies at university and used to do experiments, we had to make sure that when we did an experiment to test, let's say someone's quad strength, right? We're doing a leg extension, let's say. And I did this study. I did it with footballers, testing like the power of their quads. And when they did the machine, either I had to say nothing, or I had to be motivating them, and I had to make sure that I was doing it for every single person. Because if I wasn't shouting at them, driving them on to make them work harder, they, in truth, might not actually go as hard as they could. And so what we made sure we did is every single session, like every single time a new participant came in, is I was shouting at them, motivating them, telling them to like push harder to make sure that, they worked as hard as possible and that the results were reliable from participant to participant. So truthfully, motivation plays a very key role, okay? If you don't have a reason why you want to come to the gym, that can, make it harder to see improvements. If you don't have a reason to motivate you, for example, you're doing the same exercise over and over and over, and so you're a bit bored of it, you're not going to feel as motivated and you're not going to work as hard. So exercise selection, we can change things up just to learn something new, provide a new stimulus, and to make things maybe a little bit more exciting, okay? So I'm just going to do last little set of tricep extensions, and we're going to talk about two more things, and this doesn't even come down to program design. These are the aspects that I was talking about with sleep, stress, like things outside of the gym that can affect whether or not we're in a plateau. And sometimes these things are actually out of our control. So let's talk about sleep, for example. Okay, I talked about people on the night shifts, but let's just say you're having a stressful week at work and you're only getting 6 hours sleep, and you've been consistently getting 6 hours of sleep for 2 weeks. It's going to be hard to push harder. Like we all know that the less sleep we have, the less energized we feel, the harder it's going to be to push at the gym. It's just common knowledge. People that think that they can survive and thrive off of 5 hours, 6 hours sleep, I don't think they've experienced what they're like when they have 8 hours of sleep. There is a very, very minute percentage of the population that can actually thrive. They have a gene that allows them to thrive and survive off of only like 6 hours sleep. But that percentage of the population is like 0.00001%. It is a very small amount of the population. So I can guarantee you, if you have someone, or if you're someone who says, yeah, I thrive off of 6 hours sleep, I do great. Trust me, you get a few nights of 8 hours, 9 hours sleep, maybe even 10, you will be significantly more ready to push hard at the gym. So that is one thing I want you to consider is, if I start improving my sleep, so I go from 6 hours, all of a sudden I'm now sleeping 8 hours, 9 hours. Maybe the stressful part of work is done. I'm now able to get 8 or 9 hours significantly every single sleep. That means that might help you burst through that plateau. You've maybe been in a plateau genuinely just because you haven't been sleeping well enough. And sometimes that's in your control, sometimes it's out of your control. If it's in your control, make sure you're doing the right things to make sure you can go to bed on time, Whether that's eliminating lights, like close to bedtime, getting in like a bedtime routine, cooling yourself down before bed, whatever it is, whatever helps you get to sleep, make sure you're doing that, okay? And the other thing, lastly, about plateaus is the stress. If work is stressful, yes, it might impact your sleep. Even if you're sleeping really good, stress will impact us it impacts our hormones, so we may be able to push harder or less hard in a session due to stress. So just bearing that in mind. As simple as that really is, like if I'm having a really stressful week of work, it's probably going to be really hard to push at the gym. So that might also be another reason we hit a plateau. So when we think about plateaus, yes, we can talk about the food and like the stuff that is in our control, like the food, the programming, the volume and intensity. But sometimes there are things that are out of our control. And that is especially true for those of you that don't do this for like a living, and you have other work. Like it is a lot harder for you to be able to manage like your stress, like the outside factors, and also try and train hard at the gym. So don't feel bad about that. Just understand that might be the reason why you're in a plateau. And when those things change, you might actually find that you push through the plateau. But until then, unless you play around with the volume and the intensity and the exercise selection, like the things that you can control when you go to the gym, just accept that until you start sleeping more or the stress goes away, that you might not improve as significantly. Okay? I think that's everything. I think that is pretty much everything I could talk about with plateaus, okay? Again, it's not the worst thing to be in a plateau. Like that also might just be telling you that you're getting close to like your genetic limit. If you've been training for a significant amount of time, let's say 3, 4, 5 years, however long it is, you might be hitting a plateau or or increasing very, very slowly, because the more you train, the harder it is to improve. And eventually you will reach a limit to which your body is capable of like lifting X amount of weights. And especially obviously as you get older, like age can play an effect on that. So don't necessarily take it as a bad sign. In fact, it may be, if you've been training for a very long time, a good sign that you've done really, really well in the gym and you've progressed so much over the years that now progressing even 0.1% is going to be very significant. So it might not necessarily be that you're in a plateau. You might have just worked so bloody hard over the years that now you're getting close to your limit. All right. So there you go. Hopefully that helps you guys with your plateaus, and hopefully you can now identify whether or not you're in a plateau and how you can maybe try and break through that plateau if you are. All right. So good luck when you try this out there, guys.